Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome back to our continued coverage of the Battle of Khalkhin Gol from Princeps Games. In this episode, we're going to continue the playthrough that we started in episode 2. We're going to play this after-action style report and play the next 7 weeks of the campaign. Can the Russians recreate history and win the Battle of Khalkhin Gol, or will the Japanese alter history and keep the Russians out of Japanese-held Manchuria? Also, if you've entered into the contest to win the free copy of the Battle of Khalkhin Gol, we'll be drawing that at the end of the episode, so stick around for that as well. Let's jump in and pick up where we left off. Let's do a quick recap of the first week of our potentially 8-week-long campaign. We've got the Russians to the west of the Khalkhin Gol River trying to occupy 5 of these white checkpoint victory locations that the Japanese currently hold. The Russians down in the south have crossed the Khalkhin Gol River in the first week. They have units at the border of the Khalkhin Gol River in the central area with their engineers ready to build bridges. We've got a holding pattern up north with both sides. Japanese trying to divert forces here to the center to block this thrust by the Russians and trying to, as best they can, hold the Russians from building up a bridgehead on this side of the river. The rainy weather in the first week held up the Russians. We're going to start out this second week by setting up the weather and then having the battle for air superiority. I'll be back and we'll take a look at the results of that. We've got clear weather for the second week of the campaign. Good news for the Russians. The Russians also just outdueled the Japanese in the battle for air superiority. They pulled an 8. The Japanese pulled a 7, which was a painful card to lose and not get air superiority. Russians decided to bomb the Japanese supply lines. A bomber did get shot down by the Japanese anti-aircraft fire. The Russian bombers, however, are highly ineffective, rolling a 1 here, and this number gets doubled, so it was 4 production points, political points. The Japanese had 25. It gets reduced to 21. And again, these political points here are basically like supply resources. It costs 5 of these to build 1 infantry unit, 1 segment, 1 piece of an infantry, of a 5-strength infantry unit. So essentially this air attack did destroy kind of a Japanese infantry unit that hasn't yet arrived into the battle. But still, after winning air superiority, to roll a 1 like that and get the 2, which you multiply to get 4, that's a tough result for the Russians. And they did lose one of their precious bombers as well. Let's move into the Russian action for the second week. Now the Russians are kind of bottled up here, but one thing I realized is we can be sneaky. We can build one of the Russian bridges over here and try to send our units around. So that's what the Russians are going to try to do down here. See if they can do a kind of an end run on the Japanese defenders guarding the ford there. Likewise, if we go up to the middle, we've got to get these Russians across the river. We're going to have some engineers build a bridge in here and try to have the Russians push past it. They do have to be careful because the headquarters isn't going to get over the bridge on the first turn. It might just barely, which would mean that if they do go too far, this cavalry potentially could cut them off. So they can't be quite as aggressive as they would like, but the goal is to get across the river here. The Russians are going to hold in the north as well. Let's get them into action. We'll be back after to see how it turned out. Russian second attack goes much better in the second week. We didn't even really have to build that bridge we talked about, as Zhukov here was able to push back with heavy casualties the Japanese infantry defending this high grass. That led to us be able to create a bulge here with the Russian units pushing forward, attacking and driving back these Japanese forces. We got our second armored unit over here, and we've split them up because we can reinforce both of them and and increase our armor through the reinforcement phase. So Russians threatening to break out here in the southern front. In the center, bridge built as well, 2 units across, infantry and this armor. The armor is able to push this cavalry out, but both sides suffered losses. That's a big loss for the Russians here to lose one of their armored units. One of the strength of that armored unit's depleted here. So all in all, a pretty good turn, I think, for the Russians. Thinking now as the Japanese, we need desperately to reinforce this area. Headquarters is across, and they're across in force with more armor coming. If we can't contain this, they can make a run right to Nomohan, the Japanese base, and end this campaign quickly. So it's imperative that the Japanese get reinforcements in here fast. Down in the south, likewise, we do have some armor, we've got some artillery, we can do damage, but we're going to have to kind of spread out a little bit here. We can't let this armor get by and let them turn this corner here. So we need to kind of reorganize our defenses as the Japanese down south. Let's get busy now. In the south, Japanese artillery eliminate this armored unit here. Both batteries fired at it and absolutely drilled it, wiping out 3 armor units down here and eliminating this Russian unit. Likewise, we had an epic battle of armor here. Underneath this no offense next turn is Zhukov's armor. Commander Osigu Rippe came up here. They had a tank-on-tank clash right here and forced the no offense next turn. So they're going to be unable to attack next turn. They're completely disorganized. Japanese trying to form a line here to prevent this armor from from going around and prevent this cavalry from going around. It's a little bit holding together. Let's take a look at the center. So in the center, we had this cavalry shift around to try to hold this checkpoint here, and then had the infantry move up to try to contain this armor. But the Russian armor can push across here, and if we come through here, they can get through this gap in the Japanese lines right here and push forward a little bit, but I think we might be able to contain them as a Japanese. Not quite sure. If we fly to the north now and come up here, we can also see that we've got infantry and armor rushing to the rescue of the central defense here. They'll be here in the third week of the campaign, hopefully in time to help shore up the Japanese defenses here in the middle, which are looking rather weak. Go up here to the north. I'm trying to get a little crafty with the Japanese up here. They can build 2 bridges, so they built one across here. We could theoretically slide this infantry over here and capture this checkpoint unless the Russians' units down here respawn, which will spread them out a little bit and perhaps create some opportunities for this artillery to move up and fire. I mean, it's just starting to make problems for the Russians over here that they'll have to respond to. And with that, we come to the end of the second week of the campaign. Japanese holding but bending, Japanese bending, maybe breaking in the center. Russians have a very good offensive in that second week, but the loss of this armor down here was particularly costly for the Russians. Now we're going to shift over to the third week of the campaign, and this is where we get reinforcements. So both the Japanese and the Russians expend their accumulated political points here for replacement units. So we'll kind of show how that works in some of the areas here, and then show the results of it too. So basically it's time to bring the reinforcements which the Japanese desperately need. At the beginning of weeks 3, 5, 7, and 8, each side gets reinforcements by which they spend these political points that they've accumulated over those previous weeks. So the Russians have had 2 weeks worth of political points at 26 points each, which gives them 52 political points to spend in this turn. Now they could save a few if they want to, but we're going to spend them all actually. The way it's done, it's very simple. There's a unit cost for replacements, and you can see here that infantry, for example, is a 5, cavalry is a 6, and the ones we're looking at now, tanks, are an 8. And so we're spending to replace basically the units that were damaged by the Russians. We're going to spend 6 on this cavalry, 32 on these 4 armored units at 8 each, which brings us to 38, and then 10 on these 2 infantry units, which is a cost of 10, bringing a total of 48 of the 52 points that we're spending. Now we're going to bring these units into existing units and bring them back up to full strength. We could spend 2 extra political points in addition to the cost of the segments or the pieces of that unit to start a completely fresh unit, a new unit, but those units are brought in next to a headquarters at the end of the current week. So we're not going to do that. We don't really have the luxury to do that, I think, either as the Russians or the Japanese at this moment. But there's one other thing that we can spend political points on, and I want to show how it works. So we're looking at now, this is the other way you can spend political points. We're looking at the espionage and deception tracks for the Japanese on the left and the Russians on the right. Now, espionage allows you to re-roll a combat result, and deception allows you to retreat a defensive unit before a battle starts. And you can basically play these like tokens. You're going to accumulate tokens in these categories and spend those tokens to perform those actions. Now there's some limits on them, like you can only do espionage once in every particular attack, for example. Both countries start at these different points. The Russians have an advantage on their espionage track, and the Japanese have an advantage on the deception track. When you do your reinforcements, you can spend political points at a cost of 2 political points for each level to advance up this track 1 or 2 spaces. So the Russians are going to spend their last 4 political points to advance up to this espionage track, which will allow us to re-roll combat results on a battle. Now, how it works, however, is that this is kind of the level of research, and then when you commit to it, you actually have to make a die roll. For the Russians, it would be 4 or less on an 8-sided die in order to get 4 espionage points. So we're going to wait actually for the Russians to go up to 6 here, because it'll increase the odds that we're going to be able to get it. And then once we do that, we would get 6 uses of this espionage trait. Now, when the Japanese reinforce, we're going to do deception, because I want the Japanese to fight a defending kind of a gradual withdrawal, and we want to try to avoid casualties. So it would be really handy to be able to have 6 deception characters that we can pull back units before a battle starts. For the Japanese, they end up with 50 political points. They lost 4 points, if you recall, to the Russian bombing of their supply lines, but they did gain 4 political points thanks to a fortunate event at the beginning of week 2, which I didn't show. So with those 50 points, they're going to spend 8 on infantry for 40. 8 times 5 is 40. 6 for this one replacement cavalry unit, and these are going to be used to fortify the, kind of bring back up close to full strength most of the infantry units that are on the battle right now. And then the remaining 4 points, they're going to add 2 levels to that deception track, so they'll be able to retreat without losses in future weeks of the campaign. So we'll add these to the Japanese units and then get right back into the action. Let's talk a little bit about the Russian plans for week 3. We've got clear weather again, which benefits the Russians on the offensive. We want to try to hit this edge of this line hard with this armor, perhaps some artillery, just really try to pound this edge of this flank of the Japanese, as well as try to perhaps turn this corner down here, just pushing these forces back towards this initial checkpoint here. However, by focusing on the north end of this flank, what we can do as the Russians is, if we just scan a little bit up here to the center region, we can see as well that we can bring these reinforcements, these units, these fresh units up through here, cross the bridge and cut in here. The idea will be to hit this edge of the Japanese line, and again this edge of the southern line, break a hole in the lines here. We can see this gap and push through into the central part of Manchuria. That's our plan for the Russians. Up north is a little bit finicky for the Russians up here, is that this Japanese infantry unit now is threatening this checkpoint. It's worth 4 supply points, so it would be a pretty big loss for the Russians here. We try to see if we can defend it, but the Japanese can bring up this artillery here and hit it. So it's a tough ask of this unit. We're going to get going on the Russian actions here now in the 3rd week. They did win the air superiority battle and opted not to bomb air bases or supply lines. Supply lines wouldn't make any sense because both sides spent up to their full production point, so there really isn't anything to gain with that. Instead, they're going to take a +1 die roll modifier on 1 attack, as well as the option to use an espionage roll 1 time, which means they can re-roll one of their attacks this turn. They have to use these this turn, so we'll use those to try to further our advances here in the central part of the campaign. Week 3 may be the week that history speaks of as the swing point in this campaign. The Russians have put the hurt on the Japanese. I've put over here the Japanese losses under this massive attack down here in the southern flank. 4 armored units, 4 infantry units, an entire cavalry regiment wiped out a little bit further to the north. Severe Japanese casualties at minimal losses to the Russians. What happened? Well, down here in the south, starting out as attack, this infantry unit under here actually held very well. Cavalry advanced infantry, it wasn't able to move them at all, but then the artillery got into business, pounding this Japanese armor, reducing it massively in strength, and another infantry and armored attack on the flank up here did heavy casualties on these infantry units here, pushing them back. So Russians have advanced this kind of bulge, if you would, around the ford here. But the problem for the Japanese now is they've lost all these units, and how are they going to replace them in the short run? The next week of the campaign will be very challenging for the Japanese. Now, one thing I did want to talk about at this point too is the options in dice and how they may have played a role in this. There are 3 dice you can choose from to generate your D1 to 8 results. In this game, I'm using the standard 8-sided die, where each result has the equal number of chances to come up. But I could be using either the red die, which the 1 here has a chance of a 12.5% chance to come up here. This is a 10% chance, or the blue die, where there's only 1 1. So these alternative dice create situations where you get more standardized, normalized combat results. What happened for the Russians down is here, on their artillery attacks, they rolled an 8 and a 7, then they rolled like an 8 and a 7. They had amazing dice rolls on this one. Those types of extreme dice rolls would have been less likely had I been using these standard dice, so the result here could have been very different with much less Japanese damage. So I think one of the things I want to try to do is play the game again with like this die, where the 1 is only a 5% chance and the 8 is only a 5% chance, so you're going to get standardized results much more around that normalized returns there. But very interesting to see how the dice played a role in this, and to see the impact and the devastation caused on this Japanese front. There's not much holding it together. This could be the swing that caused the Russian victory. If we pan up here a little bit to the north too, things aren't much better for the Japanese. Right here is where that cavalry unit was. All of them wiped out with artillery and 2 armored attacks. The Russians have taken control of this, swinging the Japanese production points. They lose the 2 points here, and when you capture an enemy production zone, you gain 1 production point. You don't gain its full value. So now the Japanese have political points. The Japanese have 23 political points. The Russians have 27, which of course makes it harder now for the Japanese to reinforce the units and easier for the Russians to do so. The scales are tilting a little bit. On the flank up here, the Russians only launched 1 attack, and it was a stalemate where each side lost some units. But the bulge here, the devastation to the flank to the south, causing problems. If we take a quick look at the north, I just tried to move some Russian infantry up here out of range of this artillery to see if we can defend this. But I think the Japanese are going to be able to take that. It's a slightly problematic, but not a big deal given how well things went for the Russians elsewhere. Now let's shift our thinking to the Japanese as they come into the back half of the 3rd week. I think we do want to try to push over here and see if we can threaten this. It'd be nice to reduce their political points a little bit for the Russians. The kind of the great hope here for the Japanese, if we send our drone over this southern flank, are these 2 units moving down, infantry and armor, moving down fast to try to reinforce the Japanese positions in the central part of the zone here. They are badly needed. If they could hit this flank of the Russian attack here, put some devastation or perhaps kind of weaken these armor and infantry units, that could force the Russians to really slow down and tip the battle a little bit. But of bigger problems for the Japanese right here is, how do we patch this, which we really can't do very well unless we throw bodies in the way, with what is left down here. I fear that this bulge right here is going to be the death knell for the Japanese. I don't see a way to try to resolve this problem, but we'll give it our best shot, and we'll be back once we get done with it. Week 3 actions in the south, Japanese trying to just hold on to a defensive line here, but with all those losses, attacking really didn't make much sense. And so I'm trying to patch together some sort of defense, but it's so threadbare thin compared to what the Soviets are going to be able to bring in week 4. It's looking fairly grim here for the Japanese. The artillery units, before pulling back, did fire on the Russian armor and knocked out 2 Russian units, armored units, but that's really minimal damage compared to the heavy casualties that the Russians inflicted on the Japanese in the previous half of the week here. So I do also want to point out that this is a scenario, a battle that favors a system that favors the attackers. If we look at the 1-to-1 results here and just kind of go through them a little bit, number 1 is a counterattack where the defenders can counterattack the attacker. Number 2 is nothing happens. Number 3, if you get a 3, it's defender retreat, which is a positive result for the attacker. Number 4 is no offense next turn, which is a positive result for the attacker because the opponent can't attack next turn. 5 is a 1-to-1 exchange, but 6, 7, and 8 all inflict damage on the defenders there. So there's very low risk in a 1-to-1 battle in this game, which means that you really want to attack to the degree that you can, which is unfortunate because the Japanese, by suffering all those losses in the previous turn, really didn't even have odds to get at that 1-to-1 level. So rough situation in the south for the Japanese. If we pan up here to the center, not much better. The reinforcements have somewhat arrived. They're not yet to get into battle yet. Pull back these infantry to try to come around and patch a hole here, but I think the Russians, with some aggression, really can split that seam between the central and southern defenses here, come right through here and come crashing down into this side. You can cross this river here, by the way. This is not the Khalkhin Gol. This is the Holsten River, which is a different system. You can get across that. So they're going to be able to really come into the Russian flank here, and I think open up this whole central area of Manchuria right behind the offensive here. I'm not sure how the Japanese are going to be able to hold this together. Up in the north, more as an act of desperation than any act of sensibility, we did bring up this Japanese unit to try to take this checkpoint, and then brought some artillery in here to try to hit things. We brought this infantry unit down and attacked here, but it was to no result. So not much progress up in the north to cause any real problems for the Russians here. That brings us to the end of week 3. Let's now progress into week 4 of the campaign. As we go into the 4th week of the campaign, the weather is good. The Japanese did get an event that gave them 4 political points, which is helpful. The Japanese did win air superiority and bombed the Russian supply lines, taking them down 4 political points. So a little bit of a shift there, but the problem is not so much the units coming in as reinforcements next week as it is the units in battle right now, as the Russians have amassed a significant advantage in the southern half of the battle for Khalkhin Gol here. The goal for the Russians, I think, in this turn is to punish this line and try to break through and take this checkpoint. That would give them 2 of the 5 they need, and they're starting to open up the floodgates here to push past for these others. Likewise, same thing. I think for the Russians up here, we want to pound this newly arrived armored unit and try to take them out of the picture. And then up north, probably strike too. Probably have the artillery hit the artillery here. This infantry kind of control our checkpoint and smash into the Japanese infantry and then attack down here. This is a battle where offense seems to win, so we want to really deal damage while the Russians have the advantage here. We'll get busy. Russian attacks in the 4th week go fairly well, although the Japanese did fight very well. Still, having said that, the Russian preponderance of power in the area led to 5 Japanese infantry units lost, 3 armored units, and an artillery unit, while the Russians only lost a tank and an infantry unit. Not only that, but a number of the Japanese units here are now under no offensive next turn results here, which means that it's going to be hard again for the Japanese to punch back, especially given their lack of power in the whole. The line did hold here, although there are more holes in it now. It's teetering on the brink of total collapse, but for this 4th week anyway, the Japanese have managed to heroically hold the line. If we scan further to the center here, Russian units break forward, but again, Japanese holding here. This armored unit held, suffered casualties. Infantry up here holding and suffered some casualties, but they did extract an armored unit and an infantry battalion, infantry unit out of the Russians here. It's looking a bit grim still for the Japanese, but that turn was less disastrous than I imagined. And if we go up to the north here, the sole casualty was one of these artillery units in this pile for the Japanese. Otherwise, the Japanese just suffered some fighting withdrawals. They didn't have to, didn't really lose any units up here. So some potential in the north for the Japanese to do something a little bit dangerous, perhaps. Looking to the Japanese, I think we want to pound this unit here and try to attack here, push them back in here. It's going to take a little while to get there, but I think we might have enough power to take this checkpoint with the Japanese. Once again, try to attack here on this infantry unit to see if they could. The other alternative here is to have the infantry just sneak by. Yeah, but then the Russians could attack the headquarters. That would be bad. So we'll figure something out here to try to do some damage as the Japanese. In the disastrous center, we have to try to get some units back in here to hold some sort of defensive shape. I'm not sure we can really punish too much with most of our units depleted. The 1-to-1 odds are pretty good, but as you get further down the odds, they start to turn against the attacker here. But still, maybe some damage to do in here. It's looking fairly grim, though. Likewise, down here, the Japanese did lose Commander Rippei. His armored unit was wiped out, and so we'll take these casualties off the board, and we can see that there's really not a ton of stuff left for the Japanese to work with. We'll do our best. We will get reinforcements in the beginning of the 5th week, which will help the Japanese, but I think it might be too little too late. They've suffered such horrendous losses in this campaign. As we look at the newly formed up south, the Japanese actually had a fairly decent back half of week 4, wiping out 3 Russian armored units and 2 artillery units. They lost 2 infantry units in a failed attack up north. But I've pulled back our units to somewhat try to form a line here. I wasn't able to get the artillery back, and this unit is up here and trapped. So the Russians will push forward. We're conceding this checkpoint here, but reinforcements might brighten the picture a little bit down here as we head into the 5th week. If we look up here in the middle, likewise trying to form a line here to keep the Russians at least in this area. However, there's a big gap in the hole here, in the line here. They're roughly still trying to form that defensive line here. They've got one, and reinforcements might help, but this gap in here and kind of the surging Russian forces are definitely creating problems all across this line here, but hanging together better than I thought it would at the end of week 4 here. Up north, went well for the Japanese. This artillery pounded the Russian artillery, taking out 2 of their 4 troops there. And then, unfortunately, a failed attack here. This was totally rebuffed by the Russians, and Japanese lost 2 infantry units here. And then down here, this was failed at a stalemate. So, not any real progress in the north for the Japanese. It's looking pretty grim up here. But Russians really not able to do much either. Now it is time to go to our 5th week, and we'll start out with reinforcements again. Russians had 50 political points. They used a majority of these points to build these units, which can replace the ones that had been depleted in the previous 2 weeks of the campaign. We also used 7 points to rebuild a fighter unit for their battle for air superiority. And Lastly, they spent 4 political points to increase their espionage track here. Then they tried to roll on it. They needed a 6. They rolled an 8, which is a failure. Comes back down to start, and all that is lost. So no espionage effectiveness in this campaign for the Russians here. Let's see what the Japanese can do to rebuild their forces. Japanese go to infantry replacements. They're cheap and they're good on the defense, so trying to rebuild the line to hold off this Russian attack. Much like the Russians, they did spend 4 political points to build this deception track out, and like the Russians, they also failed to roll. This would have been so helpful because it would reduce casualties on 6 attacks. However, they fail. They go back down to start. No deception for the Japanese in this campaign either. Both sides failing on their espionage and deception initiatives. We kick into the 5th week of the campaign. The weather turns bad. We've got rain again, which will slow down the Russian offensive. Soviets also did have an unfortunate event where they lost one of their infantry tokens and one of the infantry units, so that was gone. The Russians did win air superiority and have used it to gain a +1 attack and 1 espionage token during this offensive. Now, as we go to this 5th week, I think the Russian thrust here in terms of their half of the week here will be to try to eliminate this unit, take this checkpoint, bring their forces again up closer to these Japanese forces which have disengaged, hopefully pushing down here in the south part to try to take this. That would give them their 3rd checkpoint. This might be a stretch this turn, but hopefully that would happen in the 6th week here. Then it's looking for how can we get 2 more as the Russians, maybe this one over here, perhaps one of these other 2 in the middle. Japanese again bending, but not quite yet breaking. In the middle over here, likewise, I think take out this Japanese armor unit and try to start punishing this infantry that's been reinforced to push them back, looking for more holes in the Japanese lines. Let's get busy as the Russians. Week 5 Russian attacks. I was going to come in and start out and say it wasn't all that bad for the Japanese, and then I just tallied up the casualties. They lost 10 infantry units throughout the course of these Russian attacks here, to only 1 infantry unit lost for the Russians. Russian forces in the south pushed through the 2nd checkpoint, giving them 2 of the 5 checkpoints they need for victory, and they've opened up the pathway down here to the 3rd checkpoint, which would be their 3rd point. But time, is starting to run down. There's only 3 weeks left in this campaign, so somehow they have to figure out how to capture 2 more, and it's not a certain thing here, given the supply constraints on some of these actions too. If we look up in the center, the Japanese did much, much better. Russians threw attacks against this line of Japanese defenders here, really unable to budge them, and because of supply, it's a little bit precarious to try to swing around, at least at the moment, to take this checkpoint here. That might happen sooner than later, but they don't really have the forces to extend past their supply. So not too bad for the Japanese, although some heavy casualties here. Up in the north, kind of a stalemate. No real losses suffered by the Japanese, no advances made by the Russians, and both sides just kind of beating against each other at the moment, but to no avail. Let's go to the Japanese half of the turn. Both of these units are hit with kind of disrupted to the point where they can't attack this turn. We will fire the artillery up here, but not much else the Japanese can do there. We come down into the center here. We might actually be able to get a couple of attacks off. But again, bending but not breaking here, I'm not sure if what we can do here. I think the rough plan is to hold this line as it may be and see what we can do. And down in the south, supply is really what's keeping the Russians from turning this corner. They do have to kind of take care of these Japanese units here. I think we're going to have to pull them back and try to fold our line more to the northeast here and try to... It's tough. There's just not much left to plug holes. There's holes everywhere, right? There's no line anymore. The Japanese defenses are in tatters, and the Russians just need to advance with enough caution so they don't overextend their supply lines. But we'll see what we can do as the Japanese here in the 5th week. Bad defensive turn for the Japanese. They caught this Russian artillery a little bit overextended and were able to hit it with both of their artillery units, taking out 80% casualties on it, leaving it a shell of its former self. In other places, they were able to nip and kind of pick away at Russian defenders, lost 2 more Russian units here at the cost of only 1 Japanese unit. So somewhat effective, but this kind of zoomed out here picture of the battle really shows the problem the Japanese face, which is just the paucity of units to be able to defend this ever-widening front here. So the Russians should be able to take their 3rd checkpoint, perhaps even turn a corner here and position themselves to take a 4th checkpoint. Got to kind of figure out the supply here, and maybe even if we again up here to the north as we head into the 6th week now. Russians thinking that perhaps the Japanese just basically pull back on their line here. They can push through here and get this 5th checkpoint. They could end it in the 6th week. Up north, the Japanese extracted a little bit of casualties, but it stays largely a stalemate. So we head now into week 6 with the Russians looking to push their advantage and deal a fatal blow to the Japanese. 6th week of the campaign kicks off with clear weather. Russians win air superiority and do a supply line run against the Japanese, taking out 8 political points, a costly loss for the Japanese, who will need those reinforcements in the next week to have any hope of holding on to these lines. The path to the Russian victory seems somewhat clear. I think we do have a plan for the Russians as they start this 6th week. I think one step will be to take this area down here for the 3rd checkpoint. Then next up, also, as well as they can, push forward here. There's just an infantry unit, a couple artillery units defending this checkpoint here. So if they can push forward here and grab this one, then it's just a matter of sweeping around. Maybe 2 weeks to accomplish this, I'm not sure. Alternatively, we can push hard here as the Russians try to break through this line here. Now, one thing that's happening, the Japanese are falling back out of range of the Russian artillery, which is minimizing their effectiveness, kind of slowing things down. But the clear weather should speed things up for the Russian in this 6th week. Up north, it's kind of a stalemate, both sides trading blows as best they can. Nothing tremendously exciting happening up there, but the Russians will do their best to try to inflict damage. Let's get started on the Russians' 6th week here. Week 6 results for the Russians pretty good. They capture this checkpoint down there and start to swing this southern offensive around. These are the casualties extracted across the front for Japan. So Japanese forces fighting bravely in this kind of defensive withdrawal here, but really not able to hold the line so far. However, with only 2 weeks left in the campaign, it's not out of hand with Japanese reinforcements. They might be able to pull this off and hold these lines. However, if we look up in here, all they're defending this checkpoint with is headquarters and some artillery battalions. This infantry over here will try to regroup and pull back as well. Potential they could hold this for 2 more weeks? I'm not sure. And if we go over to the central part of the battlefield, Russians need one of these 2 checkpoints again. If they get, that'd be another place to go. This line is actually holding for the Japanese infantry, not able to punch through, although the Russians now have their artillery up within range, so that could help in week 7 here. Gradually, this infantry unit fighting a withdrawal, pushing back. They keep losing strength, but this could be another point the Russians could get. Then over to the north, the place where nothing exciting happens. Some Japanese casualties up in here, but nothing really going on of any import. We go to the Japanese turn. As usual, we're going to try to piece together the Japanese defense as best we can, and hopefully they can hang on. Next week, they will get some reinforcements, not as many as before because of the attack on the supply lines and because of the depleted production point capacity, but they will get something to help defend here. Let's see how they do in week 6. Week 6 for the Japanese up in the north. They really can't get this. There's no other point for dallying around. They could conceivably, if things go badly, lose this checkpoint right at the top of the map here. So we have them pull across the bridge here to hold that and trying to hold here. These units will probably take a beating from the artillery, but yeah, I think it's okay. There's not too much else of benefit that we can do over here with the Japanese, I think. In the center, desperate moves here. This infantry unit to the north pulls back to try to defend this checkpoint in week 7, moving our line back out of range of the firing of this artillery, trying somehow to hold this last checkpoint here as well, but it's looking like one of those 2 could fall in the next turn. Reinforcements will help, however. Down to the south as well, the last remnants of the Japanese defense hole up in this checkpoint here with artillery supporting them, the headquarters behind. They will give up one more checkpoint to the south. There's no way they can defend it. That will mean the Russians they have 2 weeks to capture one of these other 3 checkpoints that the Japanese are defending. We'll see how this goes. Week 7, time for reinforcements. As we head into week 7, both sides reinforcing. The Russians have not too many casualties, so they're going to reinforce the units that are depleted, and then they're creating a whole new armored unit they're going to put next to the headquarters in the center. However, this comes in at the end of the 7th week, so it'll have minimal impact. It'll really only have a chance to act in week 8, but that's, I think, the best way for them to spend those points. Last desperation moves for the Japanese. We're able to get 6 infantry units. We'll plug them right into the depleted line units that are holding checkpoints. All units have been reinforced as we start to the Russian first half of week 7 here. Now the Russians, just a big picture, a quick look, have captured 3 of the strategic checkpoints. They need 2 more. They can get this one for sure because there's nothing the Japanese can do to defend it. They need one of these other 3. 1, 2, 3 to do that. If they can get that in this turn and hold it until the end of the turn, they'll have won the battle. And that's going to be their objective, to throw everything we can at this checkpoint, and this checkpoint to see if we can win the battle. Now the air war superiority was a stalemate, so each side lost a fighter unit, so nothing that has an impact on the battle then here. But let's get the Russians moving and see if they can claim victory in week 7 of the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. In this alternative Battle of Khalkhin Gol, the Russians have all but secured victory in week 7. Cavalry swept through this checkpoint, infantry and armor overwhelmed this checkpoint and left them with no offense next turn. So there's really not units. It would have to be a miracle for the Japanese to retake this checkpoint here. Not only that, that gives them 5. A 6th checkpoint up here in the center fell to Soviet armor and infantry as well. Just to see what happens, I'm going to see if somehow I can recapture some of these checkpoints with the Japanese, but I don't see how they can get either of them. And yes, it does end in week 7. Both counterattacks failing by the Japanese here and here were not successful as I thought they would. They would be extremely long odds. So the Japanese, like their historical counterparts, lose the Battle of Khalkhin Gol decisively to the Russians here, who overwhelmed these 6 strategic checkpoints to earn victory in the 7th week of the campaign. A couple of random thoughts before we go off to pick our winner of the free game of the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. I don't think I played the Japanese very well. I don't think we should have diverted the infantry and the armor from this north down to the south, because by the time they got here, this was already decided. And so we kind of just wasted those units. They got thrown into really something that they really couldn't help shore up down here. I think it would have been better to attack with the Japanese up here, try to take this checkpoint and this checkpoint. If we could have collapsed the north on the Russians, that would have threatened this checkpoint. And then one of the conditions of the Russian victory is that they have to take these 6 and hold 5 of their own checkpoints. They have to hold 4 of their own checkpoints. Conceivably, the Japanese could have done damage coming across the Khalkhin Gol River in the north there, and really maybe kind of put more pressure, forcing the Russians to pull some of these units out. But by wasting those 2 critical units, I think that really allowed the Russians to hold in the north, as well as push forward in the middle and down in the south. A big thing, the decisive thing, I'd be interested to see how different it is with the different dice, because that second week, we're right around here, the Russians just had a devastating attack, forcing the Japanese back with heavy casualties that really didn't give them that counter-punch. And I think to do well in this game, you really want to be attacking as you defend, because the combat results table really favors the attacker at 1-to-1 odds. And so when most of those units in the south here got depleted, they really didn't have that option to counterattack very well, which led them falling back, and it just kept steamrolling for them. The Russians were able to just sweep down here through the south. So had that second week been different, I wonder if the outcome of the battle could have been substantially different from the Japanese. I do think a third thing, when you play this game 2-player, the Soviet player is going to write their starting positions down on a piece of paper that's a map like this. The Japanese do that as well. So you have no idea where your opponent's units are going to be. That is going to dictate so many differences in gameplay, because as the Russians, we could have put a lot of units up north and pushed through here, and where those balances and imbalances are really what make this game interesting, and I think it's going to play out very differently depending upon the different starting positions. Fun time. I enjoyed this. This was really good. Everybody failed with the espionage and deception the 2 times they each side tried it, so that could have been a little bit different too. Had the Japanese been able to get that deception working, it would have minimized their losses, and they might have been able to fall back a little bit more effectively too. So lots of ifs in this historical battle. I hope you enjoyed it, and now let's go pick our winner of the free game, Battle of Khalkhin Gol.
And now it's the time we've all been waiting for. We're going to pick our winner of a free copy of the Battle of Khalkhin Gol from Princeps Games. I've got all of our entrants listed above my head here, and I'm going to scroll down momentarily. I'll press the start button, and we'll find out who our winner is. A couple quick things before we do that. The game is still available in late pledge in crowdfunding. The link is down below in the description. So if you don't win a free copy here, you can check out the game and order it down there. The winner of this does have to have a mailing address in the lower 48 contiguous states of the US. So if there is some reason there is an issue with that, we'll pick an alternative winner in the future. Lastly, the game is not shipping right now, right? I think it's got 2 or maybe 3 months to go, maybe a little bit longer. I'm kind of guessing, so don't hold me to that. before it starts shipping to people who've ordered it in crowdfunding. So the winner of this will get their copy of the game when it starts shipping to everybody as well. So don't expect it anytime in the next couple weeks or so. With all that being said, let me go in now and press the start button. Good luck to all our entrants. Drum roll, please. Laufey. I'm sure there's a cut point there somewhere that I messed up, but congratulations to them. They have won a free copy of the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. I'll be reaching out to you via the email that you put in your contest entry. Thank you, everybody, for playing. If you didn't win again, the game is available in late pledge, and the link is down below if you'd like to order it that way. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'd love to hear your comments about the game and about the playthrough, wondering about strategies and stuff like that, too. Look forward to reading your comments. Thanks for watching. Bye.